Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about fasting and how it can help autoimmunity. So, I got into fasting after reading about it in a number of different books on autoimmune disease and health and regeneration and all of this stuff, and helped for a variety of different ailments from obesity to diabetes and other digestive issues and all of that. And since a lot of my autoimmune disease revolves around digestive issues, I thought I would give it a shot. And unlike most people, I actually jumped right into the 24 plus hour fasting and not the intermittent fasting, which I think is a bit more popular these days. As I was just alluding to, there are two major types, right? There is intermittent fasting, which is where you eat every day within a specific time window. It's also called time bound or time restricted feeding. And that means all of your eating happens within the window that you decide on. And you can do a 12-12, which is common entry into the diet where you restrict your feeding to a 12-hour window to start off with, which means like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which isn't really much of a restriction. Most people don't eat excessively late at night, and most people don't eat excessively early in the morning. So it usually isn't that big of a, but as you progress with intermittent fasting, you continue to shrink that window smaller and smaller. And that has a lot of benefits, right? Basically, eating is one of the most metabolically intensive things that we can do, in that it requires the most blood flow and actually requires a lot of energy to digest our food and therefore get more energy from the food. And that's why some foods can actually be negative in terms of caloric gain or loss, meaning that some foods that you can eat, you actually lose energy and calories and weight by eating them, because it takes your body more energy to digest those foods than that food provides. And I think there's, without actually having the page up, I think celery and a few others like that are in that vein. Celery primarily because it's just fiber and water. And so back to the two different types of fasting, there is intermittent fasting with those windows, and you continue to shrink your window down further and further. Ideally, you'll end up somewhere around a 4 hour feeding window. That gives a great deal of benefit in the bodily regeneration, in terms of allowing your migratory motor complex to work. And a quick side note on that, the migratory motor complex is how your intestines move food through your body. It starts in your stomach, and you have a bunch of little muscles around the little intestines that connect your stomach all the way down. And it makes a squeegeeing motion, right? So think of it as a big tube and you squeeze down. And so the muscles continue to squeeze all the way down and push the food through your intestinal tract as it gets processed. And so the migratory motor complex is primarily driven by innervation from the vagus nerve. And so there's lots of things that can disrupt it, right? Because the vagus nerve is very susceptible to feedback from your body and mind. And your vagus nerve can be disrupted by trauma or by infection or by exposure to toxins and heavy metals and all of this stuff. And so there's a lot of different issues and diseases that people can get because of vagus nerve issues. And it's actually incredibly underdiagnosed. And we'll leave a really in-depth look at the vagus nerve for another video. But suffice it to say that the vagus nerve connects your brain to the rest of your body. It innervates a lot of your organs, and it's incredibly important. And so when it's disrupted, it can have some very drastic issues, severe issues on your health and your digestion. And so the migratory motor complex is one of those things that's innervated by the vagus nerve. And it's incredibly important for digesting your food, especially digesting it in the right time frequency and everything. So if your vagus nerve is not, if you have low vagal tone, you won't be innervating the intestine as well as you should be, which means that your migratory motor complex can be slow. And if it's slow, you can get constipation, you can get where your food get stuck in your stomach or stuck in your small intestine and causes issues. It can cause issues like overproduction of gas. It can cause SIBO, right? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it can cause a variety of other digestive and nervous system issues. There's other stuff linked to it like dysautonomia and diseases like that. So it's incredibly important to have a functioning vagus nerve and a functioning migratory motor complex. And fasting helps that process, because because the migratory motor complex only starts happening in a window roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours after eating. You will start getting the migratory motor complex pushing food through and cleaning up after your last meal, basically. And so the longer you have between meals, the more your body can do upkeep and maintenance, basically. The more your migratory motor complex can work and the more time it can work and the more cleanup your body can do as it's not doing the metabolically intensive activity of eating. And both types of fasting are very important for that. Obviously, the complete fasting, right? 24 to 72 hour fasting, water fasting, that kind of stuff is more effective overall, but it can also be deleterious to health. And so that's why the longer fasting periods, the 24 to 72 hours, are not recommended for older patients or people with heart issues and stuff like that, because you need, especially as you're older, a constant supply of electrolytes and nutrients and such to keep things going. And you don't have quite the robustness and ability to recover that someone younger does. It's very important to make sure that you are doing or thinking about fasting the right way by talking to your doctor, making sure that they're on board with it, they're willing to monitor you, and make sure that you're doing everything correctly and that it's appropriate for your age and conditions and all of that stuff. Hopefully none of you have any conditions, and that's great if you don't. Still be cautious with it. Definitely check with your doc before doing it. But in my experience, it's been tremendously helpful. I have a history of 5 different autoimmune diseases, and both intermittent fasting and full 24 to 72 hour fasting has been incredibly helpful. It's been helpful in terms of both my digestion, in that it improves, like it noticeably improved my ability to digest food, and also with some of the symptoms of some of the autoimmune diseases, when my autoimmune diseases were a lot more active. It could noticeably reduce the symptoms. Like when I had active Crohn's disease, I'd have that constant cramping and bruised, like pulling kind of feeling. My body was digesting, because it's really you're digesting food moving past areas that are inflamed, have ulcers, and are irritated. And not having the food constantly going through there helped, one, make it feel better, and two, helped it heal because it wasn't constantly being irritated. It was incredibly helpful from that respect. It's also proven over and over again in trials to be incredibly helpful for obesity, for losing weight, for diabetes. It can completely reverse type 2 diabetes, which is insane. And it's incredibly insane how quickly it does it, because a lot of the trials and studies that have come out on it say, within 6 months, basically, as long as you're not a terminal diabetic who you're basically completely insulin dependent, you can reverse the diabetes completely. Like you can go from needing some insulin injections and having very little, but still some pancreatic function, to going back to complete health. And that's insane, right? That is incredibly crazy how fully your body can regenerate from some issues and diseases, and how much fasting can contribute to that. A lot of the people in the studies completely reverse their diabetes within 6 months, which is, it blows my mind. Yeah. Again, back to more autoimmunity, like what I've been dealing with, it really helped a lot with the neurological issues around autoimmunity as well, in that I would get a lot of brain fog and a lot of fatigue, and the fasting helped with both of those. There were few times in my life where I was as clear-headed as I have been fasting, usually like the second day into a 24 plus hour fast, right? Because like the first day, your body's getting adjusted to things, and so you sleep and wake up and you're still hungry. But after another day, your body's really adjusted and starts burning a lot of fat and having using ketones for fuel instead of glucose. And so the next day, I woke up incredibly clear-headed. For the first time I did it, I was clear-headed for the first time I had been in years, in 2 or 3 years. And so it really felt like a godsend at that point. It helped with not only the mental clarity, but also the fatigue aspect. So fatigue was another big part of autoimmune disease. And at that point, like I had active CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was tired every single day, like beyond tired, like caffeine wouldn't touch it. Like I just couldn't wake up. It's like being incredibly groggy, you're hungover or just sick, like you have the flu or something, but you just never get over it. No amount of sleep helps it. And every single day is just like that over and over again. And fasting is one of the few things that actually put a dent in it. So I was incredibly happy about that. And I used it quite a bit early on I used fasting quite often early on in my battle with autoimmune disease, because it helped so much. And used both the intermittent fasting and also the 24 to 72 hour water type fast, water, juice, broth fast. and they were incredibly helpful and effective. If I were to say what was more effective, I would say the 24 to 72-hour fasts are the most effective, but again, they're not something you're going to do a lot. I don't think I've ever seen a recommendation out there to do them more often than monthly. Excuse me, because you need nutrients from food, you need to be eating. Oh, keep burping, sorry. You need to be eating, you need to have a healthy diet, you need all of this stuff to actually survive and be a person. And so you don't want to be emaciated and waste away from not eating. You definitely need to pace yourself with both intermittent fasting and full fasting, because it can be really hard to keep on weight if you're doing it. So if you are a thinner guy like I am, then you don't want to do the 24 to 72-hour fasting very often. I haven't done one in a while now. My autoimmune diseases are all in remission, so I haven't felt the need to do a 24 to 72-hour fast, but they could still be incredibly effective. I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends and people that I know and people that I've heard of do them on a semi-regular basis just to keep things rejuvenated and replenish their body and mind and all of that stuff. And so they'll do it on a monthly to a quarterly type basis, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone recommending doing it more often than a month. So yeah, keep that in mind. As for the intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding, it's meant to be done very consistently, right? So 5 to 7 days a week, every week for the rest of your life, basically. And that's really just one of those general things about eating that you should know and do if you want to live in an optimal health sense for the rest of your life. Just that you shouldn't be eating close to bedtime, and you should be eating whole foods and all of this stuff. All of that goes together in how to be an optimally healthful or optimally healthy human. And the time restricted feeding or the intermittent fasting is just one of those pieces. Keep that in mind. If you want to be as healthy as possible, definitely look into fasting. I, again, had great experience with it. If you guys want me to do a more in-depth take on either intermittent fasting or a full 24 to 72-hour fast, water fast, any of that, put it in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.